My name is Alara, and for as long as I can remember, I've been a nurturer of life. As a landscape designer, I spend my days coaxing beauty from barren earth, understanding that the health of a garden depends entirely on what's happening beneath the surface, the quality of the soil, the strength of the roots, the unseen network that sustains everything. I believed the same was true of families. I believed that with enough care, enough light, any ground could be made to flourish. It was a beautiful, naive philosophy, and it shattered one Sunday evening in the opulent dining room of the Vance family estate. I remember the scent of the room most vividly, a heavy, cloying mix of beeswax, lemon oil, and something else, something ancient and airless, like a museum exhibit sealed behind glass. My husband, Leo, sat beside me, but a chasm of unspoken tension yawned between us. Across the vast, polished mahogany table, his mother, Genevieve, presided. She was a woman carved from ice and old money, her posture impeccable, her smile a thin, blood-red line that never quite reached her eyes. "This is a lovely tart, Alara," she said, her voice smooth as cream. She delicately prodded the dessert I'd brought with the tines of a silver fork that was probably older than my entire family tree. "From that little bakery downtown, isn't it? The Gilded Spoon." "Yes, their lemon lavender is my favorite," I replied, my own smile feeling fragile. "I thought it would be a nice light finish after your incredible roast." "It's artisanal," his sister, Isabel, chimed in from beside her mother. She drew the word out, infusing it with a delicate poison. Isabel was a perfect miniature of Genevieve, all polished surfaces and sharp angles, her new diamond engagement ring catching the light from the crystal chandelier and scattering it like shrapnel. Mother's chocolate silk pie is a family tradition, of course. It takes a whole day to prepare. But I'm sure you're just so busy with your projects. The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My career, my passion, was a project. A little hobby that kept me from my true calling as a proper Vance wife, a role that apparently involved spending 12 hours on a single dessert. I felt Leo shift beside me, a subtle, familiar retreat. He was tracing the patterns on his water glass, his focus narrowing to a single point to avoid the crossfire. This was his signature move, a disappearing act he'd perfected over 32 years of navigating his family's treacherous currents. I thought of my own mother, a woman who taught me that strength wasn't about shouting, but about having roots so deep no storm could move you. "Stand your ground, Ellie," she'd say, "but do it with grace. Don't let them see you wither." So I took a slow, calming breath and met Genevieve's cool gaze. "I do love that pie. Perhaps you could teach me the recipe sometime." The olive branch fell to the table and lay there, inert. Genevieve dabbed her lips with a linen napkin embroidered with a large, imperious V. "Perhaps," she said, the word a clear dismissal. Now, on a more pressing matter. Isabel's engagement party. She looked from me to Leo, her eyes settling on him with a predatory focus. "We've been discussing the budget. The Crystal Terrace at the Grand Hotel is a magnificent venue, but it requires a significant commitment. As a family, it is our duty to ensure Isabel has the celebration she deserves." My stomach tightened. I'd seen the preliminary figures Leo had jotted down on a notepad, figures that had made my blood run cold. They were planning a party that cost more than the down payment on our first home. "Naturally, we all must contribute our appropriate share," Genevieve continued, the word appropriate landing with the weight of a gavel. I felt Leo tense, preparing to fold. He would agree to anything to keep the peace, to avoid this very moment of confrontation. But I had spent the last year watching his savings, our savings, get siphoned off for one family duty after another, a new car for Isabel's graduation, a loan to their father for a bad investment. A series of unspoken obligations that were bleeding us dry. I placed my hand on Leo's arm, a gentle but firm anchor. "Of course, Genevieve," I said, my voice even and calm. "We would be delighted to contribute. We'll sit down this week, look at our budget, and see what we can comfortably afford." The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if I had uttered a vile curse. Isabel's fork clattered against her plate. Genevieve's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose by a fraction of a millimeter, her only outward sign of shock. In the world of the Vances, one did not speak of budgets or limits. One simply produced the required funds, no questions asked. The family name was a currency of its own, and I had just suggested its value was not infinite. I looked at Leo, who was staring at me with a mixture of terror and, I thought, a flicker of awe. Then I looked back at his mother and sister. Their expressions were no longer merely condescending, they were calculating. I saw it then with a clarity that chilled me to the bone. This wasn't a family. It was a monarchy, and I, a commoner who didn't understand the rules, had just questioned the queen. The manicured garden I thought I had married into was, in fact, a war zone, and the first battle had just been declared. A week later, I decided on a tactical retreat, or perhaps a strategic offensive disguised as one. If they believed my territory was the problem, I would invite them to see the world I had built. I would show them I was capable of their brand of domestic perfection, but infused with my own warmth. I would host a dinner party. Our house in Riverbend was my sanctuary. Unlike the Vance mansion in the Laurels, which felt like a mausoleum of inherited taste, our home was filled with light, air, and life. Fiddle-leaf figs reached for the skylights, and shelves overflowed with books and pottery we'd collected on our travels. It was a space that breathed. For this dinner, I wanted it to be flawless. I spent 2 days preparing. I didn't just cook, I curated an experience. The menu was ambitious, a saffron risotto with seared scallops, followed by a duck confit I'd started curing days before. The table was set with our wedding china, the linens were pressed to a perfect crisp, and a centerpiece of white tulips and eucalyptus filled the air with a fresh, clean scent. There would be no store-bought tarts tonight. This was my soil, my roots, and I would show them what I could grow. They arrived precisely on time, a united front of quiet judgment. Isabel swept in first, her eyes scanning the room with the critical gaze of a health inspector. "The runner is a bit off-center," she announced, before her coat was even off. She marched to the table and gave the linen runner 2 sharp tugs, causing the tulips to tremble in their vase. Her fiancé, Julian, a kind-faced lawyer who always looked slightly overwhelmed in her presence, shot me an apologetic look from the doorway. "I think everything looks beautiful, Alara," he offered, his voice a welcome note of warmth in the cooling atmosphere. Isabel shot him a withering glance that said, "Whose side are you on?" Genevieve glided in behind them, her smile as brittle as a dried leaf. "How ambitious of you, dear," she murmured, lightly touching a tulip petal as if checking for dust. "Duck confit can be so tricky. It's so easy for it to turn out greasy if one isn't careful." The evening unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Every detail I had poured my heart into became a target. The wine, a beautiful Pinot Noir I'd been saving, was a bit young. The soup, a creamy asparagus velouté, was apparently a touch too salty for Genevieve's delicate palate. My playlist of soft, instrumental jazz was trying a little too hard to be sophisticated. I felt Leo beside me, a phantom of support. He complimented the food, but his praise was swallowed by the cavernous silence that followed. He would laugh at Julian's jokes, but fall silent the moment his mother or sister entered the conversation. He was a ghost at his own table, haunting the edges of the conflict. The most painful part was watching him retreat into his phone during a lull, his thumb scrolling endlessly, his face illuminated by the cold blue light, a digital escape hatch I was coming to resent more than the Vances open hostility. The final blow came with the main course. As I served the duck, which I knew was perfectly cooked with crisp skin and tender meat, Genevieve turned to her daughter. "Darling, speaking of duck, do you remember that magnificent Coke oven you made for Christmas last year?" she said, completely ignoring the plate in front of her. "Now that was a proper feast. Your father still talks about it." "Oh, that was nothing," Isabel said with a dismissive wave of her hand, though she was glowing with pride. Actually, Mother, speaking of Christmas, her eyes, sharp and bright, flickered towards me for a split second before landing on Leo. Julian and I were thinking, since we'll be in our new house by then, we would be absolutely thrilled to host Christmas this year. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. A cold dread washed over me. Leo and I had been planning to host Christmas since the day we got engaged. It was to be our first Christmas in our home. We talked about the menu, the decorations, which corner the tree would go in. It was a dream we had built together, a symbol of the new family unit we were creating. What a truly wonderful idea. Genevieve beamed, clapping her hands together softly. Your first Christmas in your new home. How special that would be. A new family tradition. Don't you agree, Ethan? My head snapped towards my husband. My heart was pounding, a frantic bird trapped in my chest. Please, I begged him silently. Please say something. Remember our plans. Remember me. I watched him, my breath held captive. He looked from his mother's expectant face to his sister's triumphant one. For a moment, he glanced at me, and in his eyes, I saw a flicker of our shared dream, quickly extinguished by a wave of panic. He cleared his throat. Yeah, he mumbled, pushing a piece of potato around his plate. Whatever everyone wants is fine. Whatever everyone wants. The words echoed in the space between us, the final shovel of dirt on the grave of our private plans. In that moment, watching Genevieve and Isabel exchange a look of seamless victory across my meticulously set table, something inside me didn't just break. It hardened. It calcified into a cold, hard certainty. This was no longer about winning their approval. This was about survival. My survival. My marriage's survival. They wanted a war of attrition, a slow, suffocating siege. Fine. But they had severely underestimated the resilience of things that have been forced to grow in difficult soil. The truth, when it came, wasn't delivered in a dramatic confrontation over a dinner table. It was stolen, overheard in fragments across the clatter of ceramic mugs and the hiss of a milk steamer. I was at the daily grind, a bright, airy cafe near my office, catching a precious half-hour with my best friend, Chloe. We were laughing about a difficult client when a voice from 2 tables over sliced through the cheerful din. It was Isabel's, clear and carrying, laced with that signature brand of saccharine venom. She's so transparent about it, she was saying. It's obviously the family money. I mean, have you seen the way she dresses? Those designer bags don't just appear out of thin air. My hand, holding my warm mug, froze in midair. Chloe's smile vanished, her eyes darting towards the source of the voice. I recognized the other woman with Isabel, Amelia, Julian's sister. The poison was spreading, seeping into the soil of other families. Poor Leo, Isabel continued, her voice dripping with manufactured pity. Mother tried to warn him before the wedding, of course, but you know how men get. So easily distracted by a pretty face. At least she can't touch the Vance family endowment without Mother's signature. That's the only saving grace. A white-hot rage, pure and clean, burned away the fog of hurt and confusion I'd been living in for months. It all clicked into place. The constant, subtle interrogations about my firm's profitability, the pointed comments about our vacations, Genevieve's insistence on being a co-signer on the account we'd set up for our home renovations. They didn't see me as a threat to their dynamic. They saw me as a thief. Chloe reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her knuckles white. Alara, don't, she whispered, her eyes pleading. Don't give them the satisfaction. Let's just go. But I couldn't. My mother taught me about the quiet strength of deep roots, but she also taught me that sometimes, to save the garden, you have to pull the most invasive weeds out by force. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even shaking. For the first time, I felt utterly, terrifyingly calm. I stood up. The legs of my chair scraped loudly against the polished concrete floor, a sound that made several heads turn, including Isabel's. Her face cycled through a series of emotions in a split second. Surprise, then irritation, then a plastered-on, brittle smile. Alara. What a coincidence, she chirped, as if she hadn't just been vivisecting my character for a public audience. I walked the few steps to their table. I looked down at her, feeling a strange sense of detachment, as if I were observing this scene from a great height. Is that what you really believe? My voice was steady, devoid of the tremor I'd expected. That I married your brother for money I didn't even know existed? Amelia looked deeply uncomfortable, suddenly fascinated by the foam on her cappuccino. Isabel waved a dismissive hand, attempting to regain control. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Alara. We're just being cautious. It's about protecting family interests. Surely you can understand that. Family interests? I let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. Or your interests, Isabel? You talk about my spending, but tell me, does Julia know about the $50,000 credit card debt you're carrying? Or the personal loan you took out to redecorate your new house before you even closed on it? Her perfectly made-up face went stark white. The information had come to me innocently enough. A few months ago, Leo had asked me to help organize a stack of family financial documents for their accountant. Buried in the pile were statements addressed to Isabel, accidentally mixed in. At the time, I'd felt a pang of sympathy for her. Now it was ammunition. You have no right, she stammered, her composure cracking. I have no right to what? Know the truth. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. The truth is, I don't want a single penny of the Vance family money. I just want my husband. But you and your mother are making that impossible. She stood up then, her chair bumping the table and sloshing their coffees. Her face was flushed, her eyes burning with a desperate fury. You're just jealous, she hissed, her voice rising, trying to paint me as the hysterical one. You're jealous because you can't stand that Leo had a life, a family, before you came along. No, Isabel, I said, straightening up. I'm not jealous. I'm just done. I'm done trying to transplant myself into soil that's been deliberately poisoned against me. I turned to leave. But if you want to keep playing this game, you should remember something. You have your position and your mother's protection to lose. I have nothing left to lose at all. I walked out of the cafe, my head held high, leaving her sputtering in my wake. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The caller ID flashed, Genevieve Vance. I let it go to voicemail. The war was no longer a series of subtle skirmishes. The battle lines had been drawn in public, and for the first time, I felt ready to fight. I sat in my car in our driveway for a long time, the engine silent, the house dark. The sun had set, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. Genevieve's voicemail played for the third time over the car's speakers, her voice a controlled, silken rage. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, Alara, but threatening my daughter after everything we have done for you is utterly reprehensible. This is how you repay our generosity? Leo needs to know exactly what kind of manipulative woman he has married. I will be speaking with him tonight. The front door of our house opened, spilling a warm rectangle of light onto the driveway. Leo's silhouette appeared, and my heart, which I thought had been hardened into stone, gave a painful lurch. He had been quiet and distant for the 3 days since the cafe incident, communicating only in brief, functional texts. Now I knew why. They had reached him first. They had spent 3 days reinforcing their narrative, shoring up their defenses, poisoning the well. I took a deep breath, gathered my things, and walked into the home we had chosen together, a space that now felt like a courtroom where I was the one on trial. He was standing in the kitchen, leaning against the marble island, the very spot where we'd once shared glasses of wine and dreamed about our future. He was holding a pale yellow manila folder. "What's this Julian's sister told my mother?" he began, his voice dangerously quiet. "Something about you confronting Isabel? Accusing her of being in debt." I dropped my purse on the counter with a heavy thud. "What's this about my being a gold digger, Leo?" I shot back, my own voice tight with a pain, so deep it felt like a physical injury. "Were you ever going to tell me that's the story your mother and sister have been peddling to anyone who will listen? Or were you just hoping I'd be the last to know?" "That's different," and you know it. How? A hollow laugh escaped my lips. How is it different? Your sister publicly assassinates my character. Your mother treats me like a line item on a balance sheet, and you just stand there. You're always just standing there, Leo, saying nothing. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I used to find endearing. Now it just looked like weakness. They're my family, Alara. The words, so simple, so final, hung in the air between us. I stared at him, at this man I loved, this man I had promised my life to, and I asked the question that had been screaming in my mind for months. And what am I? The silence that answered was the most brutal sound I had ever heard. It stretched and expanded, filling every corner of the room, of our home, of our marriage. He couldn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the folder in his hands, on the floor, on the wall, anywhere but on the woman who was supposed to be his family now. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text message lit up the screen. It was from Julian. We need to talk. Urgently. About Isabel. About everything. I think I need some space, Leo said finally, his voice barely a whisper. To think. Maybe you should stay with Chloe for a few days. A request phrased as a suggestion. An eviction notice delivered with a coward's touch. Something inside me didn't just break. It sheared off, a clean, sharp calving of an iceberg. The pain was immense, but in its wake came a sudden, shocking clarity. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and I no longer saw the man I had fallen in love with. I saw a boy who had never left home, a man who would always choose the familiar dysfunction of his birth family over the challenging, beautiful work of building a new one with me. You're right, I said, and the calmness in my voice seemed to startle him. I should go. I picked up my purse. But Leo, while I'm gone, you should do some thinking of your own. Ask your mother about the Vance family endowment. The one she's been holding over my head, the one I wasn't supposed to know about. Ask her why she felt the need to tell your sister all about it, but not me. Ask yourself why you were okay with that. His head snapped up, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion. He didn't know. Of course he didn't know the full extent of their machinations. He was a pawn, just as they'd tried to make me. I walked to the door, my phone buzzing again. It was a call from Julian this time. I answered it as I pulled the door shut behind me, leaving my husband standing alone in the ruins of our kitchen. It was time to find out just how deep the rot in the Vance family garden went. The small, dark-paneled bar where I met Julian was nearly empty, a quiet haven for the secrets we were about to unearth. He was sitting in a corner booth, a half-empty glass of whiskey in front of him. He looked haggard, his usual easy smile replaced by a grim line. Without a word, he slid a thick accordion file across the polished wood table. She doesn't know I have these, he said, his voice low and strained. I found them in a box in her closet, hidden under a bunch of old yearbooks. She's been forging my signature on loan applications, Alara. The engagement party, it's not even the half of it. It's just the tip of a massive, terrifying iceberg. I opened the file. My hands, usually so steady when sketching out the delicate lines of a garden plan, trembled slightly. Inside was a nightmare in paperwork. Credit card statements with staggering balances, each one listing lavish purchases, designer clothes, spa weekends, extravagant dinners I knew we hadn't been invited to. There were applications for personal loans from 3 different online lenders, each bearing a shaky, passable imitation of Julian's signature. And then I saw them, a series of bank statements from an account I didn't recognize. I flipped to the first one and felt the air leave my lungs. It detailed a series of transfers from an account I did recognize, Leo's personal savings account, to this new one in Isabel's name. They were dated over the past year, starting months before our wedding. Tens of thousands of dollars siphoned off quietly, explained away to me as helping out with some family stuff. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Genevieve. Dinner. My house. Tomorrow night. Non-negotiable. We need to finalize your contribution to the engagement party. The audacity of it was breathtaking. There's more, Julian said, his eyes watching my face. Genevieve knows. All of it. I found emails between them. Isabel gets into trouble. Genevieve promises to cover it with funds from the endowment, and then uses the debt as leverage to keep Isabel under her thumb. And she holds it over Leo, too. The implication is always there. We have to present a perfect image. We have to protect the family name. We have to protect your sister. So that was it. The grand, unifying theory of Vance. It wasn't just about control. It was a complex ecosystem of debt, guilt, and manipulation, all nurtured by the matriarch. The front door of the bar chimed, and a blast of cold air swept in. My head snapped up. It was Isabel. She must have tracked Julian's location on his phone. She froze when she saw me, her eyes widening in panic before hardening into a mask of fury. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice a low hiss as she strode towards our booth. "What are you doing with her?" "Just getting to know my future sister-in-law a little better," I replied, my voice cool as I calmly slid the incriminating papers back into the file. Julian was just sharing some fascinating family stories. Isabel's gaze darted from my face to the file, then to Julian's guilt-stricken expression. A cornered, frantic look entered her eyes. "Whatever she's told you is a lie, Julian," she said, her voice attempting a sweetness that cracked under the strain. "She's trying to tear our family apart." "I haven't told him a thing, Isabel," I said, standing up and slinging my bag over my shoulder. "Your bank statements did all the talking." She grabbed Julian's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. "We are leaving. Right now." My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Leo. "Mom says you're causing problems for everyone. Can you please just apologize and we can figure out the money for the party? Please, Alara. Do it for me." For him. He was asking me to apologize for unearthing a truth he was too afraid to see. I looked at Isabel, clutching Julian's arm, her entire, fragile world on the verge of collapse. I thought of Leo, begging for the path of least resistance. And I felt a profound, weary sadness for them all. "The engagement party is in 2 days," Isabel snarled at me, her face pale. "Don't you dare ruin this for me." "I swear to God, Alara, you will regret it." "What will you do, Isabel?" I asked, my voice soft but clear. "Spread more rumors? Forge more signatures? Drain another secret account?" I think we're all getting a little tired of that story. I walked out of the bar, leaving her standing there, her threats turning to ash in her mouth. Genevieve's dinner loomed, a final showdown I had once dreaded. But now I felt strangely calm. I was no longer a participant in their drama. I was an observer, armed with the one thing they couldn't control, the absolute, unvarnished truth. Let them try to force my hand. They were about to learn that the most dangerous person in the room is the one who has already lost everything. The ballroom of the Grand Hotel glittered with a cold, ostentatious brilliance. Champagne flowed like water, and the air hummed with the sound of forced laughter and polite, meaningless chatter. I stood near a marble pillar, a single glass of water in my hand, feeling like an anthropologist studying a strange and hostile tribe. Genevieve, the tribe's queen, moved through the crowd with practiced grace, bestowing smiles that were as bright and hard as the diamonds at her throat. Isabel clung to Julian's arm, a radiant bride-to-be on the outside, a bundle of raw nerves within. And Leo. Leo hadn't spoken a single word to me since I arrived. He hovered near his sister, a silent, dutiful guardian, his eyes studiously avoiding mine. After an hour of this suffocating performance, Genevieve tapped a knife against her champagne flute, the clear, high-pitched sound cutting through the noise. "If I could have everyone's attention, please," she called out, her voice radiating warmth and authority. "It's time for a few toasts and a very special announcement." My stomach clenched. I knew that predatory smile. This wasn't just about toasts. This was the public execution I had been summoned to witness, or so she thought. First, Genevieve began, her eyes sweeping the room before landing directly on me. We must all acknowledge the immense generosity that made this spectacular evening possible. A celebration like this is truly a family effort. She paused for effect. Though it seems some members of the family have been reluctant to share in the financial joys and responsibilities of such an occasion. The room grew perceptibly quieter. I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes turning toward me, a wave of curiosity and judgment. Beside me, I heard Leo mutter my name, a weak, pleading warning. "Mother, don't." "No, Leo, let's be honest for a moment," Genevieve pressed on, her voice taking on a sorrowful tone. "It's been a difficult time. Alara, for reasons of her own, has chosen not only to refuse to contribute, but also to spread the most vicious and damaging rumors about our dear Isabel's finances. This was it. The final move, to paint me as not just ungenerous, but cruel and unstable." I reached into my clutch and pulled out the accordion file. "You want honesty, Genevieve?" I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying across the silent room. "Then let's be honest." "Alara, stop it," Leo hissed, grabbing my arm. "Please. Not here." I wrenched my arm free from his grasp, my last tie to him snapping. "No, Leo. Here. Now." I held up the file. "Let's talk about where the money for this party really came from. Let's talk about the $50,000 in credit card debt your sister is hiding. Let's talk about the bank loans she took out by forging Julian's signature." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Isabel's face crumpled, her perfect mask shattering into a million pieces. Julian stood frozen beside her, the champagne glass trembling in his hand. "How dare you?" Genevieve's voice was a low snarl as she advanced on me, her queenly composure finally breaking. "How dare you come into my family, into this celebration, and spew these poisonous lies?" "Lies?" I laughed, a raw, painful sound. "Are the transfers from Leo's savings account lies, too? The ones you coached Isabel on how to get? Are the emails where you promised to cover her debts with the family endowment lies? You haven't been protecting your family, Genevieve. You've been financing a fraud." Enough. The word was a gunshot. It came from Leo. He turned to me, his face a mask of cold fury and deep, profound shame. He wasn't angry at them for what they'd done. He was angry at me for exposing it. "You need to leave," he said, his voice low and final. "Now." I stared at him, my heart a hollow, aching drum. I searched his face for any flicker of the man I married, any sign that he saw the truth, that he would stand with me. I found nothing but the reflection of his mother's will. "Are you serious?" I whispered. "After all of this, you're choosing them? Even now?" "They're my family," he repeated, the words a death sentence for us. "And what am I?" The question I had asked him in our kitchen echoed in my mind. He didn't have to answer. His choice was his answer. He looked away. In that silence, I felt a strange and sudden peace. The fight was over. I hadn't lost. I had been liberated. I walked forward and dropped the accordion file at Genevieve's feet. The papers spilled out across the gleaming marble floor like bitter confetti, bank statements, loan applications, the sordid truth of their perfect family. "Congratulations, Genevieve," I said, my voice clear. "You've won." I pulled the simple, elegant gold band from my finger. It felt weightless. I placed my wedding ring gently on top of the scattered pile of lies. "He's all yours." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. As the heavy doors of the ballroom swung shut behind me, I could hear the rising murmur of chaos. And above it all, one voice, clear and broken, Julian's voice, asking the question that would bring their world crashing down. "Is it true, Isabel? Did you do it?" Sometimes winning isn't about staying to fight. Sometimes victory is knowing when to walk away, and revenge is simply letting people drown in the wreckage they created for themselves. 3 days after the party, the city was enveloped in a cold, persistent drizzle that mirrored the landscape of my heart. I was at Chloe's apartment, surrounded by the hastily packed boxes that represented the life I was leaving behind. A furious, insistent pounding on the door startled both of us. Chloe peered through the peephole. "It's Julian," she said, her expression a mix of concern and pity. I opened the door to a man who looked like he'd been dragged through a storm. Julian's hair was disheveled, his eyes were red-rimmed, and his suit was rumpled. "You have to come with me," he said, his voice raw. "Now." "I'm done, Julian," I said, my voice weary. "I'm out of the Morgan family drama. For good." "It's Isabel," he said, his voice cracking. "She's locked herself in her apartment. She won't answer my calls. She won't answer the door. She sent me a text an hour ago. It didn't sound good. Genevieve is there, and she's just making everything 100 times worse." A part of me, the part that was scarred and angry, wanted to say, "Good. Let her deal with the consequences." But beneath the anger was a deep, aching sadness. Isabel wasn't just a villain. She was a product of a deeply toxic system, a plant that had been twisted and contorted to grow toward a false light. "She's not my problem anymore," I said, but the words felt hollow. "No," Julian pleaded, his desperation palpable. "But you're the only one who ever really saw it. The whole picture. You're the only one who didn't play the game. Please, Alara. I'm scared of what she might do." 20 minutes later, I was standing in the hallway outside Isabel's chic, sterile apartment. The sound of Genevieve's frantic pounding echoed in the narrow space. When she saw me, her face contorted with rage. "You," she spat. "This is your fault. If you had just kept your mouth shut, none of this would have happened." "Enough," I said, my voice cutting through her tirade with a quiet authority that surprised even me. "This isn't my fault. This is the result of years of lies. Your daughter forged legal documents, she stole money, and she systematically destroyed her relationships. And you, Genevieve, you held the ladder for her every step of the way." "I was protecting my child," she cried, her voice cracking. "No," I said softly. "You were protecting your control. You were protecting the facade." I moved past her and stood before the door. I didn't pound. I simply laid my hand flat against the cool wood. "Isabel," I called out. "It's Alara." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, a muffled, choked voice from the other side. "Have you come to gloat? To see the ruin you caused?" "No," I said, pressing my forehead against the door. "I came to tell you that I understand." I took a breath. I understand the pressure. The constant, suffocating pressure to be perfect, to be worthy of the Vance name, to live up to expectations that are impossible to meet. A soft thud, as if she had slumped against the other side of the door. "You don't know anything about it," she sobbed. "I know what it feels like to believe that love is conditional," I continued, my voice gentle. "I know what it's like to feel that no matter what you do, you'll never, ever be good enough. I lived on the edges of it for a year. You've lived in the center of it your whole life. It must be exhausting." The lock clicked. The door creaked open a few inches, revealing a sliver of Isabel's face, ravaged by tears, her mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. "I didn't mean for it to get so big," she whispered. "The lies, they just started and then they kept growing. I couldn't keep up. I couldn't be what she wanted me to be." "Isabel, darling, I never wanted anything but the best for you," Genevieve started, stepping forward. "Don't." Isabel's voice, though weak, was laced with a newfound steel. "Just don't." She opened the door fully. The apartment was in chaos. Cushions were thrown on the floor, empty wine bottles littered the coffee table, and in the center of it all was a mountain of paper, overdue bills, threatening letters from credit card companies, the physical manifestation of her secret life. "I'm calling a therapist," Julian said quietly from behind me, his phone already in his hand. "A family therapist. This ends today." I looked at the wreckage of the room, of Isabel, of Genevieve, who was staring at her daughter as if seeing her for the first time. My role here was done. I turned to leave, But Isabel's hand shot out and caught my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Why?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "After everything I did, why did you come back?" I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see an enemy. I saw a casualty. "Because sometimes, Isabel," I said softly, "the most profound victory isn't about destroying someone. It's about forcing them to finally see their own reflection." I gently pulled my wrist from her grasp and walked away, leaving the Vance family to stand together in the ruins. I didn't look back. I was walking toward my own life, leaving the poison garden behind me for good. 6 months later, the autumn light slanted through the window of my new apartment, a small, sunny space that was entirely my own. It smelled of turpentine and fresh soil from the pots of herbs on my windowsill. The final divorce papers lay on my small wooden desk, a neat stack of closure. As I was sorting them into a box labeled Old Life, I found an envelope I didn't recognize. The return address was for a wellness retreat center upstate, but the elegant, looping script was unmistakably Genevieve's. My first instinct was to throw it in the trash, to burn it. But curiosity, a gentler, more distant cousin of the anger I once felt, won out. I slid it open with my thumb. "Dear Alara," it began. "Isabel's therapist has suggested we write letters to those we have wronged as part of our healing process. I believe I have written and burned 17 versions of this letter to you. None of them felt right. Perhaps this one won't either, but it is the most honest I can be." I sank into my desk chair, the letter trembling in my hands. I spent my entire life building what I believed were protective walls around my children. I see now that I wasn't building a fortress. I was building a prison. The air inside had grown stale, toxic. When you arrived, you were like a fresh, strong wind that threatened to knock it all down. I fought you so hard, not because you were wrong for Leo, but because you were strong enough to see the cracks in my foundation. You were a mirror, and I hated what I saw. The doorbell chimed, a soft, pleasant sound. I glanced through the peephole and my breath caught. It was Leo. He stood on my doorstep, looking thinner, older, holding a small object in his hand. I continued reading the letter. "Isabel is in therapy. She is learning to live without the crushing weight of my expectations. Julian, bless his patient soul, visits her. They are starting over slowly as friends. And Leo." Here, the handwriting faltered, growing spidery. Leo finally found his voice. He used it to tell me exactly what kind of mother I have been and what kind of family we had become. It was the most painful and the most necessary conversation of my life. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Leo flinched slightly at my sudden appearance. The final papers came, he said quietly, his eyes not quite meeting mine. I wanted to return this." He held out his hand. Lying in his palm was my old key to the house in Riverbend. "How is she?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. "Isabel." A faint, sad smile touched his lips. "Better. Really better. The therapy is helping. My mom, too, actually. She's different." He paused and finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a universe of regret. "Alara, I am so sorry. For all of it. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger." I looked at him, the man I had loved so fiercely, and I felt not anger, but a gentle, wistful peace. "I'm not," I said softly. I took the key from his hand. Sometimes we have to be broken down completely before we can grow back the right way. He nodded, a lump forming in his throat. After he left, the scent of the crisp autumn air lingering in the doorway, I returned to my desk and finished Genevieve's letter. "I am not writing to ask for your forgiveness. I know I have not earned it. I am writing to thank you. You didn't just expose our secrets, you forced us to face them. In a strange and painful way, you saved my family by breaking it apart. You were the storm that was needed to clear the air and allow for new growth." I folded the letter and placed it in a box labeled New Life. It wasn't a memento of a painful past, but a reminder that a garden sometimes needs a controlled burn to thrive again. That night, I scrolled through my phone and, one by one, deleted the Vances from my contacts. As my thumb hovered over Isabel's name, a text message from her popped up on the screen. "Thank you for showing me what strong looks like. I'm trying." I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. I turned off the screen without replying. Some gates are best left closed, not out of malice, but out of the profound, quiet wisdom that comes from knowing which gardens are yours to tend and which you must leave behind to flourish on their own.